Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Transforming 45. This week, I am really looking forward to welcoming Emily Ahrens. She is a leading educator to spiritual entrepreneurs, renowned energy healer, and business coach. With over 2 decades of experience blending spirituality and business, Emily's mission is to help outstanding practitioners build a successful and sustainable business. Her dedication to excellence is setting the gold standard for the healing and coaching industry, seeing business as a spiritual practice, which is so true and sometimes challenging to get your head around. So, Emily, welcome to the show. I'm really glad that you are here.
Thanks for having me, Lisa. I'm really excited to be here.
All right. So, Emily, tell us, who are you and how did life introduce you to this version?
Well, you gave like my sexy elevator pitch bio. But besides that, I am a mom. I've got two young boys, 5.5 and almost 9, and I'm married. I have a husband. And we have a backyard farm. We have chickens, ducks, goats, and sheep. And I'm an outdoorsy kind of gal. I love to have my bare feet in the grass and dirt under my nails and digging in the garden. We were just talking about planting tulips. And generally speaking, I am probably one of the most like silly, upbeat, goofy people that you'd ever meet. And I happen to also be one of those people that like you go to the grocery store and somebody's telling me something really deep and really important. And I'm like, and by the way, what's your name? Um,
Yeah.
so I have that quality about myself where people just tell me their deepest, darkest things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think I'm a good friend. But besides those things, what led me to being this version of myself, when you first prompted me 30 seconds ago, I was like, oh God, where do I begin? And I let my intuition kind of guide me to, I think, really what was a really pivotal time in my life, and I think is appropriate for folks who are in menopause specifically, which is I was previously married, and that marriage was not going so well. And then it had an abrupt event that sort of led us to decide which path are we going to take? Are we taking this path and continuing this, or are we not? And spoiler alert, you already know I'm married, so no one is sitting on the edge of their seat currently. Nobody. They're like, yeah, we already know the end of the story. Thanks. Um, but curiously, my first husband, and also I think it had to do with my age because I was 26 when we got married, but at that age and at that time, he was really, really, he had this version of a wife in his head that he was really molding me to become a little on that like Stepford wife brand.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I remember him taking me to stores to go shopping. I'm like, who exactly do you think I am? Like, I would never wear
Mm-hmm.
some of these things. And I felt like I was starting to lose myself in a lot of ways because at a young age, I mean, I was 5 years old in kindergarten. I knew I wanted to help people. When I graduated high school, when I was 18, I went directly to energy healing and massage school. Like the girl knew what she was doing. I remember having the thought in high school, at my 5-year reunion, I'll be laughing at all these people because I'll have my own wellness center. And I did. Like I literally did that.
Yeah.
Um, and so I had already been walking this walk in this path of spirituality and serving others. And it was already things that I was doing. And even at that point, I could feel that like slipping away from me.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that ending was my beginning because it gave me permission to let go of the expectations and the versions of me that other people were expecting me to live up to and really get into my truth and what I want. I felt like I was a blank canvas again. And I was like, wait, what do I love again? Oh, yeah. So you resonate with that.
Hold on. Do I ever? Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
was like, are you going to say something? But
Oh, no. I'm like, keep going. Keep telling your story. We'll come back to it.
put a pin in that. Um, but I really think that that was what led me back to the path that I had already started to create for myself, because I'd been doing it for a while and I was still on it, but like near it. Um, and I really feel like that was pivotal to bring me back to my ultimate goal, which is to be of service to many, many people.
Uh-huh.
And those earlier years, I always knew I was here to do big things and to help lots of people. And even when I was 18 in massage school, we did this visualization exercise, and they're like, all right, walk through your life and your best day ever, etc. And then share what came up for you in this vision of like your best life ever. And everyone was sharing about their massage office, their little massage table and their little tapestry on the wall and their salt lamp. And I was like, oh crap, I did it wrong. And I said that. I was like, I think I did it wrong. I saw my name in bright lights on this like billboard. And I thought, everyone is talking about their massage room. So I've always had this knowing, but I didn't necessarily know how to do those things. And I think it again has taken me like praying and asking for answers to find that sort of direction and find that north, so I can pursue, how do I serve lots of people? What is it that I'm doing? And that ultimately about 8.5 years ago, it led me to finding my way from my brick and mortar business and creating an online version of it, which ultimately I had 10x'd my revenue that I was making as a massage and energy healer in a brick and mortar. And I started to really help more people. I started to do group programs and distance healing and really showing up and being visible online and having new offerings and doing retreats and having courses and memberships. Like I was doing so many new things. I was beginning to innovate.
Yeah.
And from that point forward, it's really just been a culmination of scaling that and growing it. And what else is possible? How does it get better than this? And that's really what's led me to be who I am today.
Mm, thank you.
Yeah,
Hey,
podcast over.
there's so many salient moments in what you were talking about. And it has me thinking about a couple of things. So in that moment where you're like, oh, you resonate with that, what did you want to say? I was thinking about back to when I was 30, which I now realize was like so early on in my journey, but it was the year, like it was the first year that Facebook really was a thing in my world. And at that time, when you were registering for Facebook, it asked you questions like, what do you like? What are your favorite movies? What music do you like? Like it had all of these sort of questions. And at the time, I had a 3-month old and a 16, 18-month old. So I remember really clearly in that moment, like thinking about those questions and going, I don't remember the last time I thought about any of these things. What do I like? And then it went out of my mind again because I had small humans. And then my mom was
Right.
diagnosed with cancer. And that journey went really quickly and she passed away and like everything in my world changed. So then I was, completely absorbed in educator, mother, suddenly the matriarch of my larger family, and didn't think about it at all again until I turned 45. And
Wow.
right?
15 years to think
Yeah,
about it and contemplate.
yes. And it was people who listen to the show will have heard me tell this story multiple times, but it was in that moment where my mothering role was changing. I was realizing I had outgrown the career that I had initially chosen. And I had this moment of, well, I am on the other side of everything I ever imagined for my life. And who am I now? Because everything about myself had been that I was thinking was myself was actually wrapped up in roles that I was playing, right? Not
Wow.
actually the truth of who I am. And that is so much of the unfurling that happens at this stage of life. That is, yes, it's the seeds sort of get planted when you're younger, but then we get, hurtled through this life that has more expectations than we're actually capable of meeting until I hit a wall at some point and realize, oh no, I do actually have to step into myself and actually start living the life I choose.
Mm.
Yeah.
You're reminding me of a story from the Women Who Run with Wolves. My therapist actually brought it up to my attention, I think like a week ago, the story of Seal Skin, Soul Skin, where the woman who's a seal, she leaves the sea and comes to the land, but if she's away from the water for too long, she becomes human. And if there's a man who sees her, he can claim her as his, and then she stays a human and becomes his wife and bears his children. And she dries up from the sea and all the parts of herself. And the children return her to the sea to remind her back of who she is. And then she leaves and returns to the sea forever.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this is such a strange feeling that nobody really talks about. Like, you've been told to get married, to have kids, and live happily ever after the end.
Yes.
And then while you're living happily ever after the end, during that period, all of these unrealistic expectations are suddenly like overflowing on your plate. And you're kind of just like, this is what it is. So this is how it's going to always be. Don't complain, do it all. Put a smile on your face. By the way, lose 10 more pounds. Also, you have wrinkles and you're not good enough. And we completely neglect ourselves and forget who we are, who we were, because all of our aspirational goals and who we were growing up to be had never really been developed and nurtured from a very young age. I think there may be some of us. I mean, I think maybe I'm one of those weirdos who always knew at a young age, like I wanted to help people, because there was a woman who rented a room in our house when I was a kid who was a massage therapist. And that's like what put, I think, the bug in my head about doing healing work. And maybe that was that catalyst that kind of opened me up to like what other careers are possible besides lawyer, doctor, and police officer.
Right.
And teacher. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really interesting thing that, I feel like now is definitely a responsibility for younger generations of parents to help to bring autonomy and to help our kids discern like what are their passions and interests, versus just like the standard schooling, show up, do your work, and like figure it out when you've never been taught. And I know we talked about that with your kids a little bit of like sort of shifting the ideals around as well. But it's kind of sad when you think about how women are treated in this way. And waiting till midlife to like discover yourself. And I think I see a lot of women joining my programs and they're like, I guess it's never too late. And like, of course it's never too late. Like, like everything was told, don't do it yet. And then now you're 45, you're 55. You're like, yeah, this is the prime of your life. Do it.
Yes.
Do it now.
Yeah, now is the time. Exactly. Similarly, I have this conversation all the time where it is, it is never too late. And actually, this now gets to be your time. You get to decide now how the rest of this life plays out. And that sort of takes me back to thinking about the conversation you're having about your former marriage, because that can also be something that really comes up to the forefront for women when they're in this phase, particularly if they are heading into empty nest, right? This is a conversation that happens a lot where your whole world has been around raising these young humans. And so the interactions with your partner become very transactional for a long time, unless you're putting dedicated effort. And I always say I chose well. I don't like to say lucky. I chose well in a partner who was a partner. And he actually was the one who made sure we focused energy into our relationship too.
Wow.
So I always need to give him credit when I'm having these conversations. However, that doesn't often or always happen. And so you come to the empty nest and suddenly you are alone in a house with someone that you don't even really know anymore.
Mm.
And that can be um, a catalyst either for reconnection or a catalyst for change for women, but it definitely is a part of this story.
Mm. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think my husband is not one of the folks who has that natural aptitude for partnership and growth,
Uh-huh.
and he has some learning disabilities, so he has neurodiversity, I guess you could just say. He has
Yeah.
different learning disabilities that make his brain not the same as my brain. And there's also been some brain trauma that he's suffered in his life from
Uh-huh.
sports and drug abuse as a kid and teen. Um, but I think part of that is something I signed up for. I was going in like clear-headed going, okay, this is the guy for me, and I know he has these kind of shortcomings, but I'm willing to help him to help us.
Right.
And, for me, and I mean, there's probably other people listening to this who might have some similarities.
Uh-huh.
But for me, and especially as an entrepreneur, when I was really having the shift into online business, that was also a new identity of myself coming out. And there was a period that he was very adamantly against what I was doing. Like, why are you doing this? This is BS. No one's going to believe you. You're not this and they're not that. And he had a lot of stories that he was sharing, and I really had to step it up and advocate for myself. And
Mhm.
what I realized, it took me some time to really process it, but what I realized is that it wasn't that he was against me, it was that I was still unsure of who I was, and he was reflecting that in me. And there's also something to be said that, we can say, well, no one supported me, so I couldn't. I am the evidence that no one supported me and I could.
Uh-huh.
And part of that sort of determination in myself was like, it's not to prove it to anybody. It was okay. And there was I think a thought in my mind that said, listen, if I was doing this parenting thing on my own, how
Uh-huh.
much money would I need to make? Like literally, what would I need to bring in to be able to make this work? Pay my mortgage, car payments, food on the table, bills paid, money put aside. And I set my sort of goal at $100,000. And I was like, come hell or high water, I'm going to make it work for my family. I'm going to figure this out. And that was the first thing that really motivated me to say, like, if it were just me, like, I'm not relying on anybody. I don't need somebody else to support me, but like, who do I need to be? I need to boss up. Like, if I was a woman making 100 grand a year and not having to trade my time so much, like, what would I do? What would I be? And I had to start making decisions from that identity. And I started to shift who I was being. And of course, like in my relationship, he was kind of like, well, who are you?
Yeah.
And a couple of years in, and I was really successful. And I basically had a conversation with him. I said, listen, you got to stop this. I don't know, like BS of like not supporting me, because I am on a train track and I am going towards this destination. I am here to serve people, and there is no stopping me. So you can either hop on board and join the party or get out of my way so I don't run you over. And it
Yeah.
was like a very direct conversation, but it's like, I'm not going to deal with this BS anymore. Like
Uh-huh.
you're draining my life force, and I can't tolerate this. And I don't want to teach my kid this either. Um,
Uh-huh.
And I think that part of what I'm getting at is I have always had to advocate for myself, advocate for my needs. What do I want? And then when the tables shifted and I was the breadwinner, that was a whole nother like, what the hell? Like, so before I wasn't providing as much financially. And so I was doing all these things thinking like, this is equality.
Right.
But now I'm also providing all of the financial needs. So like, what is this? So you're
And
not working as much and you're not picking up the kids and you don't know what the school schedule is. And oh, wait a minute. And so like we have to like rebalance the scales numerous times. And um, I know plenty of people who are like really unhappily married because their needs aren't getting met, but they're also not advocating for themselves.
yes, and I think that's where this conversation is so important,
Yeah.
is that I love the direct communication that you had. And I think so many people are just afraid to actually, well, one, claim this is who I am now, right? Like when you said this is it, and either get on board or get out of the way, you're setting up a situation where choices are going to have to be made,
Mm-hmm.
right? And sometimes it is more comfortable. Only this is the conversation I have a lot as well. Like it's actually not more comfortable. It's just known,
Yeah.
right? To sit in the icky, uncomfortable space, but it is known.
Yeah.
So there's an element of comfort in the knownness,
Mm.
but it is also incredibly energy expensive to be constantly sitting in this discomfort of knowing, deeply knowing that something is not right. It, just that feeling alone takes up so much of our life force.
Totally.
And it's a difficult place to navigate because we as humans tend to be afraid of the unknown.
Mm.
And yet when we step over that hurdle, that like hurdle that we make for ourselves, really, that's when we can release that energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're not sitting in a place where it is just an energy suck anymore. Yes, decisions may have to be made in terms of how we move forward, but there's great release in that.
Yes. Yes. And I'm the type of person that I can sometimes dwell on these things. So like it might be just like this constant dialogue in my head. So it's totally draining me. I'm still showing up, I'm doing work, I'm being a mom, I'm being a partner, but like there's this dialogue when there's nothing happening and there's this space and it fills the space with like and another thing that I'm not happy about.
Yeah.
Like right, add it to the list of things that I don't like. And so here was a funny thing I got from my guides one time, which was I was in meditation and I'm sitting there and I see this visual. I'm very clairvoyant. I get a lot of visuals, but I'm also all my other psychic senses are open as well. But in this one meditation, I see this vision of one of those calculators that has the ream of paper, and the ream just kind of prints up, and you get this long like receipt strip. So I see this calculator with this receipt strip kind of printing, going, with like words on it. And I'm like, what is this? And they say, this is your list of complaints. I was like, burn. And the message was basically like, if that is what you're focusing on, that is what you'll get. You're just going to get more things to complain about. Is that what you want?
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, that was like a spirit dope slap where I'm just like, over and out. Got it. Stop complaining about the things you don't like because you're just going to have more things you don't like. Okay.
Yeah, it's true, but you do get in that cycle. And the other thing I find that we do is we also think that we can mind read what the other person is thinking, feeling, right? It's so clear. I hear that all the time in conversations that I have with humans when they are telling me what their partner thinks. And the question I always ask is that true?
Yeah.
And when people sit with that and actually reflect, it's like, well, no, I guess it's not. I don't know that it is. It's just that's the story that I'm writing. But we become so confident because we have this like narrative of all of the things that we are complaining about and what our perspective is. So then we assume that our partner is going to have the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is often when you actually ask the question instead of assuming you already know the answer,
Mm.
that is where really authentic conversation, I think it really opens up space for that conversation.
Yeah, I agree. I love Byron Katie. Her four questions are so powerful if you're getting into those sort of loops of like those storylines.
Mhm.
And those questions have helped me tremendously to get out of that dwelling phase and moving forward of like, what am I going to do with this? And how do you show up when you believe that thought that it's true? And how could you flip that thought? Like, well, maybe I'm the one who is being blah, 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 not him. Um, I think it does, it's an interesting dynamic when you add in the element, like you said, whether it's the empty nesters or like I'm sharing of, opening up a new identity and discovering
Mhm.
who you are. It's another experience for your partner to sort of have like their version of that. And we all live in our own versions of reality. So
Mhm.
why would we assume that their reality looks exactly the way that ours does?
Yeah. Yes. And it is exactly what we do until our attention is drawn to it, either through our, guides saying, "Hey, hello," or connecting with someone who knows how to ask these questions.
Mm,
And the other thing I wanted to come back to that you were talking about earlier was how that actually models functioning relationships for your kids,
mm.
right? This idea that we have to stay in a place that is harmful not only for ourselves, and actually, I'd be interested to hear from you on an energetic level, right? When you are in a space that doesn't feel good in a relationship, but you're staying there because you think it is the stability that your kids need.
Mm,
But then you start seeing like hard behaviors or things happening in your kids.
mm.
Can you talk a little bit about the energetics of what's actually happening in that space when you sit in those relationships that you know need to change?
Definitely. So I think the first place I want to go with this is to return to the evidence that our children are so highly sensitive.
Mhm.
And I know, like, maybe our generation, we weren't really taken into consideration with decision making and like how things affected us. And there was no, like, you don't get to have a say, an opinion, and a feeling about the thing. It
Mhm.
was like, this is it, the end. Like, that was how okay, great, we're on the same page.
Mhm.
So,
Yep.
so now that we have more conscious parents, it's really obvious that you can't expect your kid not to pick up on a weird vibe.
Mhm. Yep.
And other way around too. If you're attuned to your kid, you can pick up and sense something is off.
Mhm.
And so it goes both ways. But if you are, let's say, in a really unhappy partnership, but you're there because of stability, and you're just like, listen, this is the thing, we're just here for stability. You're teaching your kids to dismiss their feelings, their senses, and almost to kind of numb out. And for better or for worse, like that's just what's happening. And so it's almost like you're teaching them not to trust in themselves. And
Mhm.
when we see, sense something, like you're sending mixed messages, like, listen, follow your heart, trust your instincts, but not in this situation. Like in relationship, we do different things here. So there's also a little bit of like what's the word? Like incontinuity. Like you're telling me to trust and feel and sense all of the things, but like the flags are raised, the lights are flashing, and everybody's acting normal,
Mhm.
trying to act normal. Like this isn't right. And so depending on what their ages are, they're going to probably respond energetically to the discourse. Meaning like if like let's say, for example, parents are in a fight, their energy field might, instead of being like warm and fuzzy, it could be like prickly and spiky. And so you're not seeing it necessarily, but you're feeling and sensing that like somebody needs distance here. They don't want people near them. Or you're physically giving yourself space. Like you're like, I need to leave the space, and I'm leaving the space for this reason. I'm really open with my kids in that, like, if I'm feeling stressed and overwhelmed, I say, I'm feeling really stressed and overwhelmed. I need to go outside right now to take some deep breaths and like to cool myself off. And so they know that language, but it's a different thing that if you're in a living situation and you're kind of in that energy all the time, continuously, where there's a little bit of a sadness, closed offness, prickliness in the air. Because let's say, oh, they're going to a friend's birthday party, because we know there's 90 of them every single year, right?
That's one great thing about the empty nest. No more birthday parties.
Yeah, we have one on Saturday. So
bless you.
Right. Thank you. Peace be with you. So let's just say the parents are one way, or the partnership, they're one way in the home, but then they're out of the home.
Yeah.
Either with one or both of them, and they're acting and feeling different. Like there's a lot that we are picking up on: body language, eye contact, physical touch. There's a lot of non-physical and non-verbal cues that are happening that our kids are completely savvy to. Like, I know when my kids see if I've cried, they're like, "You've cried." Like they know it. They want to know what's going on. So it's like, as much as you think, the summary is, as much as you think you can hide the vibe, the energy, you absolutely cannot. And so my opinion on it, and take it for what you want, is to be open and honest with yourself and your partner, but then invite your family members into the conversation if it's appropriate, and in the way that feels appropriate or age appropriate for them, that they can understand and digest. And, if there's an issue happening, like there's something happened in my family a few weeks ago, and it got me really fired up, and I had to go outside and take a walk, and I came back and the kids were like, I don't want you guys fighting. I'm like, listen, I'm not fighting. I'm really upset about this thing, and I want to have some resolution, but it's hard to have a resolution if I am so activated and upset. So I'm working on just calming myself, and maybe I can have some space to think more clearly if I'm not so upset. Like that kind of a dialogue where it's like, it's okay to have a disagreement or to have this like discourse, but like I'm letting them know it's safe, and I'm going to create a resolution. And they can also see after the fact, like the dust has cleared and the parents are back on the same page, holding hands, talking to each other, cuddling, kissing, being kind to each other, being kind to me. And so I feel like my family's not perfect by any stretch.
Right.
But I feel like part of the energetics, and also like I do energetically clear the house. Sometimes I'll use sage, like, okay, everyone needs to just get the energy out of here. And I think from an energetic standpoint, in summary, which is, we can all feel it. And there's been scientific evidence that shows within 3 seconds of walking into a room, you can feel what's going on there. So you're crazy to think that the kids in your life who are bonded with you energetically, and especially particularly under the age of 7, like they're in your field, like you're sharing an energy field at that age.
Yeah.
So they're going to know, feel, sense, and every single thing. So I also would be open to hearing if they're having, stressful or like nightmarish dreams, if they're processing the stress in other ways. And my son, who is almost 9, a few years ago, our neighbor passed away, who he was particularly close with. And maybe like 8 months later, he was like becoming so angry all the time and like lashing out. And I was just like, what is going on with this kid? And I was like, tell me what's going on. He's like, I don't know. And I said, if you had to guess, like, what is really, really making you upset and angry? And he started bawling. I'm so sad that Grampy's gone.
Uh,
So it's like, we also
uh,
have to understand the humanity of like, sometimes things are expressed as anger, but it's really sadness that's beneath it. Because when we look at the spectrum of emotions, it's so much easier to feel anger than depression, or anxiety over depression. So if you look at like the scale of emotions, like that anger is like, actually I kind of feel better than feeling depressed.
uh-huh.
So things can express in different ways, but part of that sensitivity, like I said, like it really can go both ways. I hope that answered the question. It's kind of a
Yeah.
long way around.
No, it really did. And I agree. And I think some of the points you were making about connecting the physicality of emotion
Hmm.
and how we actually process it, because we do so much to separate out, like, well, emotions are one thing and your body is another, and like, the body is how we feel. It's
Hmm.
how we experience things. So on two levels: one, helping kids know and like tune into what is it that you're feeling in your body right now. So, going back to that conversation about the anger, and
Hmm.
then the approaching it from the why perspective is so important, instead of, again, going back to like the assumptions of why someone is doing what they're doing, right? Is,
Yeah.
tell me what you're feeling in your body right now. Like, how does this feel to you? And then why do you think you're feeling like that?
Hmm.
And it really shifts the way you can have conversations. And kids know. It,
For
like,
sure.
they
They are
so deep.
so much more connected than adults are. Their energy field is still so open, and like
Yes.
they're connected with it.
Yeah.
And I think on that topic of like where in your body, I mean, this is something I do with my clients now when they're feeling hesitation, resistance, fear, um, anxiety. I will always ask, where do you feel that in your body? If you could just find a place, where do you notice that the most? And when they can tune into where it is in their physical bodies,
Yes.
and sort of get curious with it, like, okay, so maybe it's in my heart. Okay, so in your heart, can you remember when you first felt that?
Hmm.
And allowing them to kind of go back, because it's always going to bring them back to some childhood, teenage memory
Yep.
of because it's a familiar feeling. When did I first feel that?
Uh-huh.
And being able to process that work from that angle as well. But has these like incredible children, like it's all coming at them. And I think what gets me kind of like worried, but it's like it's the human experience, like from working on so many thousands of people at this point in my life and career, it's like I know that things that I do and say are going to embed themselves in your subconscious somewhere, and you're going to be like scarred or traumatized from some of
Yeah.
these interactions. Like I'm fully conscious of I'm gonna mess you up, and there's nothing I
Yeah.
can do. I'm just gonna try my best. And so I think part of that efforting is like, listen, it might be that I went to get them ice cream and I thought I was doing them a nice thing, and then they're like, no, you said this one thing, and it just like set me off for the rest of my life. And
Yeah.
they're gonna be seeing a person like me and get some therapy on it later on.
I know.
But I think it's like when we can really be conscious of the energy that we're putting out, and I think it's about taking responsibility. And I think I've said that to my husband before, is like,
Hmm.
can you just take responsibility for your energy? Like what you're walking into the space with, are you adding to the space with the energy that you're bringing in? Or maybe like, are you draining it?
Yeah.
And something that I've shared very seldom actually is back when my son was a baby, my husband is a plumber, and so he works in some real sketchy, nasty places and at sometimes. And so,
Hmm.
when you're crawling through cobwebs and mouse and rat poop and it's disgusting and dark, like that can really put a damper on your mood, right?
Yes.
And
Oh,
so
yeah.
it's completely reasonable that when you get home from a day like that, that you could maybe be like not in a great mental space. And what I was realizing that was when my husband came home, it was like this dark cloud approached the house.
Mm.
And like then like stormed in each of the rooms. And I was like, okay, that's not like that. Like, we're having a great day before you walked in here.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had this idea to install energetic waterfalls over the thresholds of the front and back doors wherever he was going to enter the house. So essentially, it was an intention that I set as if there was a waterfall over the threshold of the door. And the waterfall would rinse and release any energies that didn't serve the overall energy in benefiting the house and those who were in it. So just to rinse and release, let go of anything from his day and his work so that he could be back to himself and contribute a positive energy to the space.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I still do this for like when I'm hosting in-person events or retreats or speaking at the events, because there's this energetic component that you can not see, but you can feel.
Yes.
And I have some great in-laws, but some of them are a little wacky sometimes. So the energetic waterfalls, because you can't like walk up to your in-laws and be like, let me just sage you. You have really bad energy. And I mean, maybe I could do that. I do weird stuff, but it's sort of a way of doing that without doing it.
Yes. Yeah. No, I love that. And I think it's a really great way of connecting to the way energy is actively impacting what is happening in your daily life, right?
Mm,
And again, separating out, like talking about that story with your husband, him coming in that black cloud, that's not him,
mm,
like self him.
mm.
It is the energy that he has picked up from being in these spaces. So being really clear and conscious around like, well, that's experiences, that's stuff that he's had and picked up, but it's not actually him. And so how do you use that frame in the work that you do?
The frame of
Like
separating.
this, sorry, like just that intentional connection around energy and how it flows through your business.
Um, I use the connection of energy and how it flows my business in a lot of ways. And particularly this year, I was listening really to my body. We're
Mm-hmm.
back at the body,
Uh-huh.
um, of how I wanted to feel at the end of last year, because I was feeling really stressed and I was feeling like I was having a lot of just like false starts that I needed to get a win and I was not quite getting there, and it was all around the stress and sort of the trauma that is launching things into
Uh-huh.
the world. Because for anybody who's familiar with launching in a business, it takes a lot of effort and energy to create an offer, to put it out, to get it advertised and into the right eyes and hands and all of that, to attract people into the thing
Yeah.
and to then
I'm in the thick of
over.
that. I'm in the thick of that right now, so I feel it. I
Okay,
feel
great.
you. Yeah.
We will talk about this trauma. And then to get them to buy and to really be in that phase of detachment while these high intensity, high stress things are all happening all at the same time, and being able to balance your life and have like actual stability mentally, physically, and energetically. After doing so much of that, I was like, I don't think I can do this anymore. It feels like it's not sustainable. And so
Uh-huh.
in my body, it was like something has to change. And so I thought, well, what if I transitioned into more of an evergreen model where I mention things and they're just kind of moving and shaking and coming in, and I'm not having to feel like this pressure cooker of like, get it done and bring in the results all of a sudden. And so it was the feeling in my body that instigated the change in my business model. And that that flow of like how I want to feel started to show up in like what I wanted to offer and how I wanted to offer it. And it started to open me up to new ways to innovate what I was doing. And I'll use more of a tangible example what I mean by the energy flow. which was, and I actually just did a whole workshop on this particular thing. So I'll try not to go into a 60-minute presentation.
Yeah. We'll do that another time. We'll do that another time.
2 minutes. Solid 2 minutes.
Yeah.
In summary. So what it led me to do is survey my audience and sort of hear more about them and what they were going through. And I adapted a training and a whole sequence of events so that instead of coming to this like launch live training, they were coming to an evergreen recording of a whole different workshop that was based on the survey responses said, I need these things right now. And then it was an invitation. After the free training, it became an invitation to get information, to go to an information session, also pre-recorded. After the information session, they could book a call with me. So the model from free training to apply and join my thing and book a call, I reorganized it so it felt a little bit lighter and more like, or less of me involved in having to like put on the show and song and dance and tap dance. And I wasn't sure if it was going to work. It felt lighter for me. It felt like I was hitting the pain points of what they said they needed. It felt like I was serving them what they said they wanted. And it felt like, okay, so maybe it's going to take them a little bit longer to get to that final phase. But I think the people who get to that final step are the ones who really going to want it. And the results really spoke for themselves. My free training that led to a $7,000 like high ticket certification, $7,000 from free to $7,000 within the first 2 weeks alone of offering the presentation. I had hundreds of people signing up for it. I had dozens of people who wanted to get the information session about the training. My first information session, I didn't pitch them anything. I didn't sell them anything, which is totally like, what do you mean you're not selling them anything from your workshop? And I was like, I don't feel like I want to sell them anything. If they want to get more information, they can get more information.
Yeah.
And the folks, it led to 7 people who booked clarity calls, and all 7 people end up joining the program. So for me, I was like, well, shoot, that was way easier. I had a higher attendance rate from the Evergreen workshop. I had people at the finish line who were like begging to let me into the program. And it's like, oh my gosh, it was a whole mindset shift, but I wanted things to just flow and feel better. And I think part of that whole energy thing is I also recognize how my personal energy impacts the results that I get. And when I'm under a lot of stress and strain, I do all of the things to shift my energy. I'm meditation, hypnosis, cold plunging, walks in nature, exercise, stretching, sleep, massage, eating whole foods, drinking plenty of water, taking my vitamins, like there's a long list of the self-care things that I'm doing on a daily basis just to hold that status quo, because my energy is impacting everything. And if I'm going through one of those like, oh God, is this going to work? And blah, 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 blah. If I stay there for too long, it's like a magnet attracting more of that. And so I've really also come back to some of the like old school classic stuff like law of attraction, like coming back to simplistic law of attraction, because again, it's like I need to focus on what I want, how I want to feel. That is what I want to manifest. And it's really hard sometimes as an entrepreneur when things are all coming at you at the same time and you're trying to be cool and things aren't cool right now. And it's like, it's a huge challenge to get your energy to match what's happening in your business. And also we're in a really strange time with the climate where buyer behaviors have changed so dramatically in the last few years. And as a business that's been around, online business been around for 8 years, like I've seen what it used to be like, and then having these huge shifts and swings, like, okay, my messaging has to be different. My way I market it is having to be different. Social media is so wonky that it's like one day you're hot, the other day no one knows who the hell you are. And like you just got to ride it out and keep showing up. And I think what helps me is when I am doing meditation and I'm coming back to my purpose and back to my mission, it brings me that sort of stillness. Like instead of being on the top of the waves of the ocean where things are kind of coming in at you and crashing and waving and rocking, I
Uh-huh.
can drop down, down, down into the depths of the ocean where things are still and like hardly even in motion.
Yeah. And I think that that is, it's a beautiful place to leave this conversation because that is something that no matter what your context is, whether you are have a career, whether you are retired, whether you are an entrepreneur, whatever it is, that idea of, yeah, like sinking down into stillness and what you know to be true for yourself and let all the other stuff happen up here, right?
Mm,
And you get to just be here.
yeah.
Emily, thank you so much for this conversation. This was great. And
Thank you.
yeah,
It was a pleasure to be here.